Hello and welcome to this tornado outbreak short summary. This is a re-upload of and re-recording of the 2020 Easter tornado outbreak, which ran from April 12th to April 13th of 2020. This is a re-upload because the aspect ratio was all jacked up and I'm not happy about that, so here I am re-recording it. Looking at the meteorology of this outbreak, there was a high pressure around the Deep South area that had been allowing high temperatures, instability because of those high temperatures, because warm air wants to rise to a point where it matches this surrounding air temperature, as well as pulling moisture from the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico into the Deep South. This had been going on for around a week at this point. Up until April 12th, that is. So around April 12th, a shortwave low is a low pressure that on a surface map does not produce as big of an isobar dip as normal. So it doesn't really, it's not any less powerful though. But in any case, this shortwave low is crawling through Texas and through an extremely volatile and very favorable environment for long track and wide tornadoes with discrete supercells that are likely going to be producing multiple tornadoes. At 10:40 a.m., the NWSSCP, as well as coordinating obviously with NWS offices in the area, issue a PDS, particularly dangerous situation, tornado watch, again at 10:40 a.m. This watch would last until 8 p.m. That is 10 whole hours. That is much longer than normal. Usually even a PDS watch lasts for the average of around 4 to 8 hours, so 10 hours is quite a long time. As we can see here from the outlook of April 12th, we had a moderate risk in place, and just of course in that moderate risk, total severe probability was a 45% hatched. Lastly, looking at the parameters for this PDS Torn Watch, tornadoes, EF2 tornadoes, and severe wind are all high, everything else being moderate. That is also not very common. Even less common is everything here being high. So just an indicator of just how volatile this environment was. This outbreak would produce 141 tornadoes in 37 hours across 11 states. Granted, some places like Texas would only get 4, Florida only got 1, and Maryland only got 2, but those tornadoes are still produced by this outbreak. Of these 141 tornadoes, 16 were intense, and of those intense tornadoes, 3 of them were violent, meaning EF4 plus. There were 15 weather watches issued throughout this 37-hour period, 2 of them being particularly dangerous situation watches, one of them being the tornado watch that I had just gone over. This outbreak would cause an immense $3 billion in damage, leave more than 4.3 million people without power in total, at one point more than 1 million be without power. And lastly, this outbreak would injure 257 and tragically take the lives of 32 souls. We have 6 notables to go through here. The first one is the south-southeast of Brownsville/McCombville. As far as I was able to research, these are kind of like a twin city situation, to Monroe, Louisiana, and this was an EF3. Thankfully, there were no deaths or injuries, but this tornado did cause an immense $250 million in damage. With a track of only 8 miles long and a width of only 300 yards wide, we will be seeing what exactly caused all of that damage. That would really be from a hangar that was destroyed at an airport. Spoilers. A trailer, an unknown type of trailer, at least as far as I was able to research, I wasn't able to find what kind, whether if it was a trailer home or like a tractor trailer, was flipped on Louisiana Highway 34, and this was at EF2 strength. A tornado emergency was issued for the town of Monroe, Louisiana, and this tornado emergency is seen here. We see that this is part of a QLCS, or quasi-linear convective system. So a QLCS line of storms is essentially, it can be as big as a squall line, but it does not move as fast as a squall line. These are more commonly referred to as bow echoes. And a tornado can form in between kinks of heavy rain. And as we see here, there is a small kink between some heavy rain. It was at this point in the town of Monroe that homes were heavily damaged or destroyed at EF3 strength. One home practically destroyed is seen here at the bottom left. And lastly, that hangar that I talked about was practically destroyed at Monroe Regional Airport. Our first violent, our second notable, is the southwest of Sartonville to southwest of Bassfield, Mississippi, and this was an EF4, causing around or over $2.75 million in damage. This tornado would injure more than 3 and kill 4. This tornado would traverse just shy of 34.15 kilometers, or 21.21 miles, and reach 1,935 yards wide. We do know that this tornado would rapidly intensify in the town of Hope, Mississippi. It would then continue intensifying, where it would sweep one foundation completely clean. This was found to not be above low NDF4 though, because it is estimated, or at least guessed, that a car had been thrown into this home, and then the tornado simply cleaned everything up. A brick house was also leveled around this time. This was also found to be no more than around mid-level EF4. Normally, a brick house being completely leveled might be indicative of high-end EF4 or even EF5 level damage, and that would be with a strongly secured, very well anchored brick home. However, this brick home was not found to be properly anchored, so it was given around mid-level EF4 strength. Past this brick house being leveled, I should say, some cinder block buildings would be damaged at around EF3 strength. From this point on, the tornado would be pretty inconsistent in strength, waning and waxing between EF3, EF2, EF1, and EF0 strength, until eventually dissipating. Our second violence and the star of the show here is the south-southwest of Bassfield to north-northeast of Pachuta, Mississippi EF4, phonetics be damned. This tornado would cause an insane $73.4 million in damage, injuring more than 95 and tragically kill 8. With a path of 109 kilometers long, or 68 miles long, this is a very long track tornado that reached an extremely impressive third widest in the world, 2.25 miles wide. And that is seen here in this bottom rightmost photo. This cell had already caused a tornado emergency for Bassfield, and it produced the previous EF4 that we had just talked about. So, because this cell then quickly recycled and produced this monster, the emergency remained. There was rapid intensification of this tornado as it was hitting Bassfield. It would reach its peak strength in the town of Cantwell Mill. It was at this point that the SPC issued Mesoscale Discussion 360, stating, quote, a violent tornado with potential peak winds of 170 mid-grade EF4 to 205 EF5 strength is likely ongoing, end quote. This is not normally done by the SPC. The only other time that I know that this has been done is with the Mayfield EF4, which was a 190 EF4, if not 200 maybe. Officially, it is a 190. In any case, moving past that, this tornado would reach its peak width west of the town of Seminary, Mississippi, and that is where this bottom right-handmost photo was taken. The community of Soso was hit at EF4 strength. Nearly everything in the community of Moss would be damaged. This cell, as we can tell from this zoomed in photo granted, is most likely very discrete, which means that it is by itself and able to take advantage of any and all of the ingredients around it, which can contribute to the width and indeed contributed to the strength and long track of this tornado. An even longer track tornado was the east-southeast of Topeka to southwest of Rose Hill, Mississippi EF3. This tornado caused just over $34 million in damage, would injure more than 2, but thankfully cause 0 deaths. This tornado, like I mentioned, tracked even further than the previous EF4, just shy of 135.4 kilometers. This trek was 84.12 miles long. This tornado also reached 2,040 yards wide. This cell was trailing the cell that had produced our previous 2 violent tornadoes, but trailing far enough away from it so that it could take advantage of ingredients as well. It is very heavily implied that a discrete cell are able to produce long trek tornadoes much better than QLCS storms, or QLCS storms, I guess is the right term I should say. No need to correct myself. Or really anything else. We at least know that this tornado would achieve EF2 status in the town of Topeka, Mississippi. It would hit Oakville at EF3 strength, and would destroy the James Hill Church at EF3 strength as well. From this point on in the tornado's life, it would slowly lose strength, waning to EF2, EF1, EF0, and eventually dissipating, of course. Our second to last notable went from Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, all the way to south of McDonald, Tennessee, and this was an EF3. This tornado caused $225 million in damage, would injure 18 and tragically kill 2. This tornado had a path of 18.37 miles or 0.56 kilometers long and reached 1,500 yards wide. This tornado was QCLS embedded, and here we definitely get the more classic looking pseudo-supercell structure here. While it is not discrete in the slightest, I've already explained how QLCS tornadoes happen. We do have that little notch there, which is not always, but can indeed be indicative that there is some inflow, and therefore something is going on there. An auto parts store would be near obliterated. As we can see here, only one wall would be remaining, and at that, it is almost destroyed. This tornado would cause Indubis Charleston to issue its first ever tornado emergency. This tornado would damage dozens of homes majorly. On top of that, many of these homes would be majorly damaged structurally, which makes it even worse. You can have a majorly damaged home, but a majorly structurally damaged home is something entirely different. It makes it much harder to try to recover things from that home. This tornado in total would damage 2,718 properties, and of those, 259 were destroyed. Our last notable is the west and northwest of Scotia or Scotia, again, phonetics be damned, to north-northeast of Fetchtig, South Carolina. This tornado was an EF4. This tornado caused an unknown amount of damage in US dollars. We at least know that it injured 65 and caused 5 fatalities. With a path length of 23.73 miles, or just under 38.2 kilometers long, this tornado reached an impressive 1,300 yards wide. This tornado was an early morning, relatively short-lived, and evidently multi-vortex tornado. This most likely contributed to the injury count, as most people are going to be asleep during the early morning and, of course, at night. This is why nighttime and morning tornadoes are so dangerous. A medium security prison was severely damaged, so much so to the point that many prisoners had to be moved to a completely different prison, for some reason completely out of state. The prisoners were transferred, I believe, to a northern state. I forget what state, but I find it weird that they weren't transferred to another prison in South Carolina. But besides that, this tornado would reach its maximum width, but only EF3 strength, as it reached the town of Nicksville, South Carolina. It would reach EF4 strength at the town of Speaks Mill. This is South Carolina's first violent tornado and first enhanced Fujita scale rated violent tornado since 1995. With 141 tornadoes in just over 36 hours, this outbreak was pretty violent. As you can assume, and as is the trend for many tornado outbreaks, many tornadoes came from families. That is because in an environment in which tornadoes are able to happen, a supercell will keep on producing tornadoes until it runs out of ingredients, or until, say, if it's in front of a line of storms, until that line of storms catches up with that cell. Note that all but one of our notables were more than 1,000 yards wide. Again, there is indeed a trend of discrete cells with nothing else around them for the most part, creating long trek, wide tornadoes. There was one Georgian EF3, which I did not talk about here, that threw debris 25,000 feet up into the air. Now, it is rightful to assume that this might happen with every tornado, as it is part of the updraft, so wouldn't debris get caught in this updraft? Well, yes, but normally it is not to this high in the air. There is, of course, the debris cloud, but 25,000 feet is definitely abnormal. Like I mentioned with the Bassfield tornado, that EF4 is the third widest tornado ever, only coming in third because of the 2004 2.5 mile wide Hallam, Nebraska tornado, and the 2.6 mile wide El Reno 2013 tornado. Like I mentioned at the beginning, around 1.44 million people were without power at one point in time during this outbreak. There's many records for the Carolinas here too. This is the deadliest weather event in South Carolina since the '84 Carolina tornado outbreak, which I have indeed done a video on, shameless plug. This outbreak is first in the number of EF2 plus tornadoes in South Carolina, with 12, 8 of them being intense meaning 3 and above. This is the 6th largest tornado day for North Carolina, with 12 tornadoes. And lastly, the NWS issued 141 warnings within 24 hours. This is the most since an March outbreak in 2012, and also coincidentally actually matches the number of tornadoes that happened in this outbreak. However, as is the case many times, Warnings are issued when there is no tornado because it is just radar indicated because there's a hook echo. But in any case, that is all that I have for this re-uploaded, re-recorded video on the 2020 Easter outbreak. I thank you all so much for watching. I hope to see you all in the next video.